Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're taking what might look like a dense, bureaucratic framework, specifically the Swedish Research Council's 2026 Guidelines for Responsible Internationalization, and we're going to make it incredibly clear, structured, and highly actionable. Look, if you work in higher education, research, or innovation, understanding how to navigate international partnerships safely is no longer just optional, it's absolutely essential. So, let's dive right in by asking the most critical question facing universities and researchers today. How do we protect open science in a closed-off world? We live in an era where the free sharing of knowledge is fundamental to solving massive global challenges, yet, paradoxically, that very openness is increasingly being weaponized. How do we effectively balance those two realities? Well, first we have to understand that our cutting-edge innovation is a literal target. Academic institutions and research centers are no longer just isolated ivory towers. Research is now central to geopolitical strategy. State actors are actively seeking to acquire technology and knowledge, and they're doing it not just through traditional espionage, but by exploiting seemingly standard academic partnerships to leapfrog their own research. This is exactly why these 2026 guidelines were created. Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover 1. A new global reality. 2. How opportunities meet risks. 3. The 5 dimensions framework. 4. The Swedish perspective. 5. Examining the abroad. And finally, 6. Setting up a secure collaboration. Let's start with Section 1, a new global reality, focusing on geopolitics and research. We really have to recognize that modern threats aren't just military anymore. Foreign powers are actively targeting academic environments to covertly acquire technology and knowledge. We're seeing dramatically increased geopolitical tensions and state-sponsored intelligence gathering happening right on university campuses. We're talking about severe cyber attacks, unauthorized knowledge transfers, and even covert operations mapping out national critical infrastructure. These are the very real, day-to-day threats that researchers are facing right now. Moving on to Section 2, opportunities meet risks, or what we like to call the balancing act. Sweden absolutely thrives on open, free research. In fact, academic freedom is fiercely protected by law. But on the exact opposite side of that scale, institutions must simultaneously enforce strict legal and security boundaries, things like export controls and robust security protection, to secure their national assets. It's a delicate equilibrium. Actually, scratch that. It's more like a high-stakes balancing act. If the risk perspective dominates too heavily, we miss out on world-changing global innovation. But if absolute openness dominates, we severely risk national security. That brings us to proportionality. Basically, this means we don't just look at risks in a vacuum. We weigh them directly against the value the collaboration actually brings. Your security measures have to match the tangible risk of the project. It's all about being smart and protected, not just shutting the door completely on the rest of the world. All right, Section 3, the 5 dimensions, which make up the core of the 2026 framework. This framework elegantly breaks complex risk assessments down into 3 really manageable levels. On one side, we have our home turf, Sweden, and our domestic regulations. On the other side, we have the partner's turf, the foreign country's environment, and the specific institution we want to work with. And bridging the gap right in the middle, we have the collaboration itself. Every single international project needs to be evaluated through these specific, focused lenses before it can safely proceed. Getting into the finer details, there are specific checkpoints institutions literally have to clear. Think of it as a comprehensive, top-to-bottom scan, evaluating the broad Swedish context and your internal day-to-day operations, thoroughly assessing the foreign geopolitical landscape and the specific partner's integrity, and meticulously designing the rules of the collaboration to protect everyone involved. Let's unpack what each of these dimensions actually means in daily practice. Let's look at Section 4. The Swedish perspective, focusing heavily on context and operations. Before looking outward, Swedish actors have to make absolutely sure their own house is in perfect order. First off, are you inadvertently violating UN or EU sanctions? Does this specific project genuinely align with Sweden's broader international priorities? You also have to rigorously examine your own internal operations. Are you dealing with security-sensitive data? And a massively important factor here is foreign direct investment. Even a seemingly harmless foreign investment into a university spin-off company could trigger a major national security screening. Now, pay close attention to this part, because navigating the so-called gray zone of technologies that can be used for both civilian and military purposes is where some of the absolute biggest institutional risks lie. We aren't just talking about literal weapons here. We're talking about transformative, dual-use tech like advanced AI, cutting-edge biotechnology, or experimental drone materials. The guidelines make it crystal clear. If you're working on applied research with a real-world, practical application, you might be subject to strict, legally binding export controls. Okay, Section 5, examining the abroad. This is all about evaluating the foreign context and your specific partners. It's so vital to impartially and realistically assess the foreign context before you even engage. Think about it. Does the partner country's legislation legally force their researchers to share your joint data with their military or intelligence services? Are there severe human rights abuses or a systemic lack of academic freedom? If a country suffers from systemic corruption, can you truly trust the integrity of the research data you get back? You also have to assess broader threats, like the distinct risk of natural disasters or sudden political instability completely derailing your work. Then, you absolutely must look at the specific partner. You need to know exactly who is sitting on the other side of the table. This means conducting deep, proportionate background checks, proper due diligence using reliable open sources. You need to verify that the partner institution has true academic autonomy and isn't just acting as a political front. You have to verify they're highly legitimate, avoiding so-called bogus universities. And crucially, you need to look at who else they collaborate with. You definitely don't want your secure partner acting as a backdoor conduit, leaking your hard-earned knowledge directly to antagonistic states. Finally, Section 6, a secure collaboration, focusing entirely on design and values. Designing a collaboration means baking our core values right into the foundation from day one. You need clear, enforceable agreements based on good research practice, like the European ELIA Code. You must effectively integrate sustainability, gender equality, and diversity into the overall project design. And on a highly practical legal level, you need ironclad agreements on reciprocity, meaning both sides genuinely benefit equally, and absolutely clear rules dictating exactly who owns the intellectual property and the final results. Open science should be as open as possible and as restricted as necessary. I absolutely love this phrase because it perfectly captures the ideal state of modern research. We want to share our data, we desperately want to publish our findings, and we want to solve massive global problems together. But we must fiercely protect personal data, commercial interests, and our national security when the context rightfully demands it. Remember, managing these partnerships is an active, ongoing cycle. You don't just do a single risk assessment at the very beginning, sign a piece of paper, and file it away forever. You assess continuously throughout the project's life cycle. You implement proportionate security. And crucially, you must establish a clear exit strategy, an escape hatch, before you even begin, just in case the risk profile suddenly shifts. Finally, thoroughly evaluate the project afterwards so your institution learns, adapts, and improves its security posture for next time. The world is highly complex right now, and the threats are incredibly real, but the profound value of international collaboration is still immense. By using these 5 dimensions, you can successfully protect your research and your values while still actively engaging with the world. So ask yourself, is your institution truly prepared to navigate this gray zone with eyes wide open? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.